Have you found that your struggle with sleep has come in waves, waves that are becoming more and more intense, and that is less and less of an interval between the waves, and that you have to do more and more to manage those waves? Or have you found that looking back, you realize now that you're in this intense struggle that there were waves of insomnia that preceded it? Well, if the answer is yes to any of these, this video is for you. We're going to talk about priming today, which explains this experience. But before we do, I actually have an apology to the community here. Sorry for Friday's thumbnail where I said, time to say goodbye. I think I said, and, of course, I just wanted to spark some curiosity. And somebody see that was like, oh, what does Daniel mean? I didn't mean to scare anybody, and there were several people in the comments who said they felt they were scared. So sorry about that. I'm not going to repeat that one, and I'm not going anywhere. In fact, we're only getting started. So just want to start with that. Now over to priming. So what we're going to do today is we're going to see why we can have these like waves of insomnia that increase in intensity, and that can lead up to like an ongoing struggle where there are no more waves, like we are in a struggle. So just two sections. Really, we're going to talk about what is priming, which I call this, and how to meet priming. And the reason I'm talking about this today is really that last week on Tuesday, I had a coach class where I was teaching Batul, our new coach in training, and we talked about priming. And the same day in dropping class, a client described priming. And again, the Friday dropping class, another client described priming. So I was like, I got to talk about this, which I have never done before. So it's the first time I'm talking about priming on social media or openly here. I've talked, and shared it with clients, of course, before, but not for the general community here. So excited about talking about this. Before we do, one little thing, our Insomnia Immunity Program, there's going to be a price change from the current $139 per month to $259 per month in 7 days, so in 1 week. So if you've wanted to join and you think about it, this is a good opportunity because if you get in at 139, it stays like that forever for however long you want to stay. And the reason for the increase is just I've gone through a little bit of a similar similar journey as with the app Bedtime, starting with a really low price point, thinking like, oh, one coach can handle like 100 clients, realizing that no, to lead the struggle needs more personal attention, needs more hand-holding. And the Insomnia Immunity Program has been growing, and I'm seeing that we need probably to add more drop-in classes, maybe add more coaching into it. So and it provides so great value. So that is why that's happening. But again, if you thought about it, this is a great chance. And with that said, yeah, let's jump into our topic. So what is priming? Okay, so I'm gonna share like a scenario with you, and then we're gonna define priming and go from there. So imagine this: 5 years ago, you had a health scare or something else happened, something stressful, and you didn't sleep for 3 days, right? Somehow it resolved. You don't really know how, you don't really remember anything, but you remember that this happened. The memory of that happening is still there. That was 5 years ago. Now, 3 years ago, you're moving from one place to another, or something else happened, and you didn't sleep much for a whole week. And this time you did take some melatonin, you worked out extra, you went running, and somehow it resolved, right? But in the last year, there has been more random episodes where sometimes you don't even know why they happen. They seem to happen by themselves. You've been able to manage with lifestyle changes, maybe sleep hygiene, maybe some supplements, but each time the wave hits, it seems to be harder and harder to control. And finally, after becoming a mom, let's say after six weeks ago, now things are completely chaotic. You're bewildered. The struggle is intense. It's ongoing, and nothing you did before works, right? So what I'm trying to highlight this is those series, again, the series of events that unfolded before this intense struggle. And this is what I call priming. So priming I define as a series of episodes where not sleeping is identified as a problem, increasingly reinforcing the belief that not sleeping is a threat. So if that still sounds like not really clear to grasp, I think it will become clear as we go through these like 3 real insights that I want to share. That where priming explains a very common phenomenon. So firstly, we can see this, that the first episode or episodes They typically follow some external stressor. We can see that something triggers us to sleep less, which is so normal, right? When we have a health scare or when we're moving, a lot of us just sleep a little bit less. But if that sleeping less is identified as a threat, then it can become a little bit more intense. Like it really, like in the example we talked about, really, even that 5 years ago, the first one, we can see that there was some fear around it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have remembered it. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been like 3 sleepless nights. So there was already there some fear. And next time there's an external stressor, it comes up again. It becomes a little bit more struggle sleeping. But over time, these external stressors aren't really required anymore. They aren't necessary for us to have a wave of insomnia, because just an internal stressor, like the popping up of a fear or worry thought like this, like what if it happens again? Just thinking like what if it happens again? That now is alone. That is and now is enough to trigger a wave of insomnia. So we can see how priming it explains how we can go from sort of requiring an external event to have insomnia to not needing that. It can sort of get it a life of its own. The internal stress or the internal fear, if will, is sufficient to trigger a wave. So that's one thing that where I think priming really explains this phenomenon. B, uh, the waves often, like looking back, it can look like, these waves, they stop, they cease after an intervention, but that's actually not what happens, because we know that the fundamental truth when it comes to sleep is that sleep is effortless. Like someone who sleeps well does that because they're not trying at all to sleep. So what can be so tricky to see is that we can have a health scare 5 years ago and we don't sleep hardly at all, let's say for 3 nights, but this is not an embedded fear. It's not an entrenched fear. So something else happens in our lives, and our attention goes in that direction, and we sort of forget about the struggle with sleep, and then we sleep one night, and then we're like, oh, I slept fine. Maybe there's no problem. And it goes away actually just because of distraction, just because our attention goes in another direction. But the second time it happens, then in the example 3 years ago, uh, the person in the example took some melatonin or did some exercise. Now we can see that there is actually more effort, but it's still not a really entrenched fear. So still, there's some distraction, like sleep happens again, you know, but it can now start to appear like it was the intervention that worked. It was the melatonin, it was the exercise that worked again. So uh, to distill this, I created like 2 examples. So one example thought is this: I need to keep increasing what I do to manage my insomnia. It is getting worse, which is actually a misunderstanding. The correct understanding is this: my efforts to manage insomnia are increasing because the fear is increasing. And this is why it appears that things are getting worse. This is the correct understanding. But again, I think this is really, really helpful to see, because when we think that, oh, I've managed in the past by doing things, then will lead us to try to manage more and more and more. But seeing that it was actually the absence of that, we get distracted and we tried less to manage. That led to these waves disappearing in the past. That takes us in the direction we want to go. And finally, here, priming, as the word really implies, it kind of sets you up for something, sets us up for something. Priming can lead to like the big one, when there's a big stress in our lives and we really don't sleep and we're really scared. And now distraction isn't sufficient to move attention away from this like perceived threat we now have. Now it is ongoing. Now it's self-sustaining, and I call that the big one, when that's the moment where we have a really intense struggle and it becomes ongoing, right? And again, this the big one is of course very intense, but is actually a chance to fully understand and leave all the waves and all the struggle. And that's why I'm so happy you're here, because you get to learn this and you get to leave this whole thing, right? And how do we do that? So how do we meet priming? And actually, I really think, as if you're a longtime follower of the channel, I say this very often: understanding is really, really would help so much. Like when you had all these waves and it's gotten more and more intense, and you don't understand why, it can be such a mystery, and you can be so bewildered that alone isn't helpful. Because when we're bewildered, we're going to look for a solution, we're going to try more and more, and it can be really tricky. So understanding this, understanding priming, understanding why you had the waves and why they, if you had the big one, why they set you up for that, that is so helpful, because from understanding alone comes less effort, less pondering, less experimentation, etc. So I think really we can meet this by educating yourself, by what we call befriending wakefulness. If you've never heard of that, then browse through the channel and you understand it. And as always, deploying kindness, not being hard on ourselves. I think that is really the way to be priming and really the entire struggle. And finally, here, I think once you start seeing things clearly, you can start to see that even between the waves, you may not actually have lived an entirely free life. You may have had this kind of background fear of the wave. You may have had like these little efforts, things that you did or avoided in your life to keep a wave from coming. You may not have lived an entirely free life, and now is your chance to do exactly that. And speaking of chances, if you want to, take the opportunity to work with us, then of course head over to the Sleep Coach School and check out our programs. They're all mature programs. They've all been there for a while now. They're all tried and tested. And again, if you want to join the immunity program, it's a great time to do that, because again, if you join now, that's the low price point will be yours for however long you need it. So with that said, I hope this brought a lot of value, and I'm rooting for you. And if you join us, I look forward to seeing you on the other side. With that said, bye for now and see you soon.